So for example, in March, we will have a virtual program with print princess Kelsey Russell, who has made a name for herself reading the print New York Times on TikTok. In February, we will have 2 in-person programs about learning how to read Essence Magazine on Flipster, which is a digital magazines platform. And also in March, we will have a physical in-person zine workshop here on the 5th floor of the main library. So if you're local to this area, or if you have a San Francisco Public Library card or just curious, we're welcome you to join us for any or all of these programs. Now, I would like to acknowledge that SFPL sits on the unceded ancestral territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, and we give thanks for our ability to live, work, learn, and play on their unceded ancestral territory. Today we'll be learning about the Johnson Publishing Company, which published Ebony Magazine and Jet Magazine, amongst other iconic African American titles. San Francisco Public Library offers access to the complete digital back file of these magazines through our digital subscriptions and databases. So we'll be putting the links to these in the chat so that you can access them and read them and delight in not only the works of Moneta Sleet, but also the other incredible things that have appeared in the pages of these magazines over the years. And here's a little preview of what the databases look like. So if all you need is a San Francisco Public Library card and you can access this. Also, physically in the library, we have most of the complete run of these publications in print. And soon we will be installing a little display on the 5th floor of the main library showcasing Moneta Sleet Jr.'s work in Ebony Magazine, curated from our collection of bound magazines. So all you need is a library card. So hopefully you can take a look at some of these resources. Now, on to the show. Allow me to introduce our presenter and hand it over to him. We will have time for questions at the end, so feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we'll be monitoring those and passing them over at the end. Jehoiada Calvin is a memory worker, writer, and zine maker from Chicago. He's the archives assistant for the Johnson Publishing Company archive, helping to process the historic collection for Ebony, Jet, and other magazines and programs. He is a fellow of the University of Alabama's Social Justice for Archivist Masters of Information, Library and Information Studies program, focusing on memory work that supports practices rooted in culture and politics outside of institutional archives. Read his writings about Sleet in the JPC photo archive at 60 inches from center, which you'll have a link in the chat. Jehoiada, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for that introduction. I'm gonna try to start sharing my screen if I can.
Oh, it went away, but we had it for a second.
Sorry, yeah, I'm trying
It's
to
okay.
figure out, it says like screen sharing paused when I put it up. Is it?
We can see it. Do you want to try going to your next slide and let's see?
Sure. Is it clicking through?
No, we're still on slide 1. Let's see.
Okay, let me try something really quickly.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna try again.
Mhm.
Can you see that? I know you can see my bookmarks, but
Yeah, I can see your screen. I can see your Canva presentation.
okay, awesome. And then if I click through, I can, yeah.
Yes, now we're advancing. Perfect. Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Like Kelsey said, I'm Jehoiada Calvin. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm an archivist with the Johnson Publishing Company archive. Outside of my work with JPCA, I'm also an artist, a writer, and a zine maker that focuses my creative practices on memory and information work. I spent over a year processing more than 6,000 cartons of color film slides by iconic photographer Moneta Sleet Jr., starting by identifying and inventorying each individual carton. As someone who has many close loved ones who are photographers, including my sister and my best friend, I grew a deep appreciation for Sleet's work and legacy. I felt connected to him through his endless photographs that I was blessed enough to see, and I hope sharing this presentation with you all helps to continue and grow that collective appreciation that Sleet so rightfully deserves for his legacy of photography. A little bit about the Johnson Publishing Company and the archive. Using his mother's furniture as collateral for a $500 loan, John H. Johnson founded the Johnson Publishing Company with his wife Eunice Walker Johnson in November 1942 with his very first publication, Negro Digest. Mr. Johnson began publishing picture magazines in November 1945 with Ebony, a monthly publication, and JPC started Jet, the weekly pocket-sized magazine, in November 1951. Mr. Johnson focused on creating Black equivalents of white mass media magazine publications. JPC also published Ebony Man, Ebony Jr., Ebony Africa, Ebony South Africa, Black Stars, Black World, Beauty Salon, and Copper Romance. And on the left, you can see some images of John H. Johnson and then the magazines. These magazines demonstrate the lives, work, and legacies of Black people, groups, and culture from the mid-1940s through 2008. Some other JPC ventures include the Ebony Fashion Fair Runway Show, the Fashion Fair Cosmetics line, the American Black Achievement Awards, the Ebony Jet Showcase TV series, a book publishing firm, and radio stations like WJPC and WLOU. In 2019, the changing media landscape prompted JPC to file for liquidation, allowing for the reinvention of the historic brand. Linda Johnson Rice, John H. Johnson, and Eunice Walker Johnson's daughter, would go on to lead the reemergence of JPC in 2021 as a multimedia and production company. Ebony and Jet are now owned by 1145 Holdings. At the time of liquidation, the archive was purchased jointly by the Smithsonian Institution, the Ford Foundation, Mellon Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, and the J. Paul Getty Trust. Now, the archive is co-owned by the National Museum of African American History and Culture and the Getty Research Institute, who share stewardship responsibilities and while the archive is being cataloged and digitized for public access. The JPC archive comprises 2,500 linear feet of an estimated 4.5 million images, including photographic prints, negatives, color transparencies, and about 9,000 audiovisual recordings. Also included are textual materials like press releases, clippings, notes, company memorandum, annotated mock-ups, ephemera, correspondence, and publications. The JPC archive represents not only the vast image collection used to publish the magazines, but also institutional evidence of how JPC functioned as a mass publishing company. JPC has and continues to be the topic of many exhibits and books while inspiring artists, journalists, publishers, researchers, and readers. In the archive, we can see the work of JPC's iconic editors, writers, and photographers, including Moneta Sleet Jr. Moneta Sleet Jr. was born on February 14th, 1926, in Owensboro, Kentucky. Sleet grew up in Owensboro while attending public segregated schools and acting as his family's photographer after being gifted a box camera as a child. Sleet attended Kentucky State College and studied photography with Dr. John Williams, who was a family friend, dean of the college, and a successful photographer. Sleet served in World War II as a staff sergeant before finishing his degree and accompanying Dr. Williams in his move to Maryland State College's photography department in 1948. While working there, Sleet met Juanita Harris, who would later become his wife. And in 1950, Sleet gained his master's degree in journalism at New York University after briefly studying at the School of Modern Photography. Sleet worked for Amsterdam News and Our World before joining the JPC team for Ebony and Jet magazines in 1955. Sleet's iconic image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice, and his wife, Coretta, at his funeral would go on to make Sleet the first Black American to win a Pulitzer Prize in photography in 1969. The photograph, which I'll show later, was eligible for the award because of its appearance in newspapers through a wire service. These screenshots on the right here are images from the book Special Moments in African American History, the photographs of Moneta Sleet Jr., Ebony Magazine's Pulitzer Prize winner, a book that JPC published to honor the great legacy of Sleet's work with JPC. And you can see in the dedication, it says on the bottom, as he dedicated his exhibitions to his wife, Juanita, to his children, Gregory, Michael, and Lisa, to his grandchildren, Moneta III, Ashley, and Kelsey, and to the memory of his parents, Ozetta and Moneta Sleet Sr. And that's a picture of him on the bottom with his family when he was younger. I'm going to talk a little bit, starting off the presenting of the photographs with family values. Family was something that was clearly important to Sleet and something that I could see through the film slides of just how many cartons were filled with images of his family at different events, at holidays, at birthdays, and things like that. There's a documentary that came out in 2023 called A Fine Remembrance, the story of Moneta Sleet Jr., where there's comments from his son, Gregory Moneta Sleet, that says he's just talking about how his father was very wonderful and attentive, are the words that he used, especially with his son Michael. And the photo on the right is of Michael with his speech teacher, and on the left is the Sleet family with Moneta holding up the Pulitzer that he won. These clear values of his own family was shown through the endless photographs of them on vacation, at weddings, holidays, birthdays, proms, and more. So even though he was busy traveling for work very frequently, he definitely also made time for his family. Those same values are shown through the pictures of celebrities and everyday people with their families that he took. This is a picture of Jeffrey Holder and Carmen de Lavalade with their son Leo in 1958 that was featured in an Ebony article that February about the couple. There are actually multiple articles, and you'll see a couple of other ones about the Holders, I guess you could say. This is an image of an unidentified family in Montgomery from a 1971 feature created by Sleet and Gwendolyn Brooks to highlight the legacy and loss of Dr. King to the city and to the larger civil rights movement. If you follow the link to 60 Inches from Center that I think SFPL shared in the chat earlier, there's an article that I wrote kind of reviewing that feature in Ebony. Here's Carmen de Lavalade again with her son Leo in 1960. And on the right is a picture of Coretta Scott King with her daughter Yolanda in 1958. Family is also a definite theme in Sleet's photos of the King family. I'm going to dedicate a whole section to this because their relationship was very intimate and trusting, and I want to kind of expand on it more. Sleet met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1956 while on assignment and would go on to document the civil rights leader's life. From his reception of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 to the March from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 and beyond. Sleet and King would go on to build a relationship that allowed the photographer to portray King's humanity through tender moments outside of his activism, like his family life. After King's assassination, Sleet mentioned in interviews the feeling of needing to, quote, make sense of King's death, while figuring out also how to cover his funeral. When there were issues with people not letting him into the funeral as a photographer, Coretta demanded that he be let into the press pool or else there wouldn't be any press pool allowed. The photo on the right is of the picture that he ended up taking that day that won the Pulitzer, and the photo on the left had to have been taken either moments before or moments after. Something that I really appreciate about working at the archive is we are able to see entire photo shoots, especially if you're looking at the film and not just at the prints. So you can see kind of moment by moment how things were laid out as he was doing his job. There's also a story in the documentary I mentioned earlier about Sleet's son Gregory meeting with King when he was a child, dropping off Sleet at the airport to go photograph King receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Gregory also mentions that he later got a print and a pamphlet in the mail with a note that read, "To Gregory, for whom I wish a great future and whose father I admire very much," with very being underlined. These are pictures of Dr. King with his family and sleeping on the bus that he traveled in on the left here. And this is another picture of the King family that was featured in a Jet article in 1958 about Coretta Scott King. It's kind of dark, so you can't really see it, but it's in the bottom right of the article there. There's a running theme, I think, of grief and remembrance in Sleet's photos, of course, of Dr. King and his family before and after his death, but also of other significant movement leaders like Betty Shabazz, who we'll see in a couple slides. The picture on the left is from the same photo shoot that was used for the cover of the JPC published book, What Manner of Man, by Lerone Bennett Jr.'s biography of Dr. King. And on the right is a picture of the funeral procession for Dr. King in 1968. This is both color and black and white, but it's the same photo of Rosa Parks, Ralph and Juanita Abernathy, Ralph Bunch, Dr. King, Coretta Scott King, and Frederick D. Reese leading the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. I wanted to show the contrast of, and I feel like a lot of us assume that pictures from the civil rights movement were all originally in black and white, but that's definitely not always the case. Sleet's photography career covered civil rights movement marches, meetings, and rallies, portraits of people in America, Africa, the Caribbean, South America, Russia, the West Indies, and Europe, artists, musicians, actors, and other celebrities, the independence of different African countries, presidential visits to African countries, and like I mentioned earlier, images of Sleet's own family. Sleet's images are well respected for their empathy and respect towards the people and places he photographed specifically. That's something that's particularly noted about his work. I'm going to share some images from different movements that Sleet captured. Even though this image on the bottom right of Betty Shabazz at her late husband Malcolm X's funeral did not win an award like the one of Coretta Scott King, it's just as striking to me. There's a lot of emotion coming from her face in the image, even though she doesn't take up a majority of the composition of the shot. Sleet was trusted to document moments of grief by movement leaders who shared visions of Black liberation, even when the visions of how to get there might have been different from each other. On the left, you can see again a photo shoot, like a photo, and then the cover image that was from the same shoot of Betty Shabazz in Ebony in 1969. This is a picture and a screenshot from the article that showed her going to a memorial at a school in Brooklyn for Malcolm X. There's the second sentence in the caption of the photo says, "Widow is not affiliated with paramilitary group, did not request guard," because they're talking about how the Black Berets youths were providing tight security for her. And that's something that is also noted about JPC publications, where that even though it was definitely a radical stance to be taking at the time to focus such a massive media publication and just all the other ventures on Black people, culture, and life specifically, um, at the time that was a very big deal. They also, I think because of trying to mediate the politics of what they were trying to do and still gain public support, a lot of what they presented politically tended to be more neutral, as opposed to, I think, more radical stances like that of the Black Panthers or of Malcolm X. These are pictures from the 1963 March on Washington. Sleet is part of a long legacy of Black photographers who were and are challenging white supremacist visual culture and politics with their work. Sleet and his peers worked during the civil rights movement to, quote, awaken social consciousness, as Deborah Willis wrote. These are pictures from a 20-page story called 50,000 March on Montgomery from the 1965 March from Selma to Montgomery. And these are pictures, and then again, the image from the magazine with the caption of volunteers preparing food for the folks that were walking that long, long distance. These are photos from the same march. On the left is Dr. King singing in the rain. Sleet's photographs of the civil rights movement helped mobilize folks into action by connecting them to the movement and putting faces to the names of activists. As Cherise Smith wrote, quote, Sleet's advocate-style photography provided evidence and support and allowed readers to see themselves as participating in a greater national and even international process of liberation, end quote. To close out this section is a picture of Coretta Scott King singing while somebody plays at the piano, and on the right is a portrait of Rosa Parks. The images that are currently up, or currently digitized, I should say, that I have access to for presentation purposes, don't really represent the full scope of pictures of the Black diaspora throughout the world that we really have. But I wanted to just show a handful so you have an idea of what'll be coming. On the left is Winnie and Nelson Mandela, and on the right is a picture of the crowd from the 1960 Nigerian independence celebration. On the left is a picture of a crowd waiting for parade in Monrovia, and on the right is a picture from Nigeria. Sleet also was really involved in capturing the stars in theater, dance, music, really, you name it, he was probably there. These are pictures of ballet dancers from 1959. On the left here shows the marquee for the play Jamaica that was produced at Imperial Theater in New York City in 1958. And on the right is a picture from the 1955 production at Alvin Theater of House of Flowers. The next slide I'm going to show you actually has the back of that same print that's on the previous slide. And you can see how the caption is pasted on the back, giving some information about the play. And then a stamp and a handwritten publication date that is actually how we in the archive find and connect photos to publications. So on the right, you can see the pictures printed on the bottom of this first page of the article about the production. Still related to House of Flowers, the picture on the left that was used for promoting this event is actually from an article, another article about the holders that you can see on the right here, where they show images of the two of them preparing for and actually in the production House of Flowers. Here are some pictures of Juanita Hall in 1958, Debbie Allen in 1982, and Cicely Tyson meditating in her garden in Malibu in 1974. This article on Cicely Tyson that comes out in Ebony in that same year is pretty interesting. It talks a lot about her spiritual journey, kind of as she was tending more to herself as a worldwide star. Some other pictures of different kinds of artists. On the left is the photographer James Vanderzee, and on the right is Ada B. Cabrera, who was featured as a scarf designer in a 1956 Ebony article. These are pictures of Stephen Burrows and Willie Smith with unidentified models. Burrows and Smith were two Black fashion designers who were featured in this 1969 issue, a Soul Look from the 30s that featured Black designers in the industry. I think not just because of Ebony Fashion Fair, but obviously heavily related to it. Ebony did multiple features on Black fashion designers in and out of the US. And this is a picture of Maya Angelou in 1982 at home in her bed. I have noticed that a lot of pictures Sleet took were of people lounging at home. It, I think, shows me and others how much he was trusted into people's personal spaces so that he could capture moments that really photographers at other publications I don't think could capture. This is a picture from 1956 of Billie Holiday laying down. These are pictures of Eartha Kitt in 1957, lounging on her couch, smoking a cigarette, tending to her garden, and in her closet. This photo shoot was actually used for an article that came out the same year titled Fame Can Be Lonely. Star says her stage character and temperament combined to keep men away. Thought that one was pretty funny. These are pictures of Sade in 1986, of Diane Carroll in 1957, and an undated photo of Earth, Wind, and Fire backstage before one of their performances. These are pictures of gospel singers Mahalia Jackson and Clara Ward. This is Mahalia Jackson singing at the Prayer Pilgrimage in 1957. If you don't know or haven't heard of the Prayer Pilgrimage, I recommend you look up, if you have access to through SFPL or another institution, to the EBSCO archive. I would really recommend looking at the Ebony article about the Prayer Pilgrimage because it's a pretty interesting story. And the photo in the middle and on the right are from a photo shoot in an Ebony article of the same year, featuring Clara Ward in her prayer room. And then to close out this section, these are pictures of the Supremes in 1965 and the Pointer Sisters in 1973. Moving on to some pictures of athletes in different sports. These are pictures of Muhammad Ali. On the left is just his sweaty back. This picture is so interesting to me. I don't know what prompts somebody to be like, I want to take a picture of this, but it turned out to be a really great photo, I think. I think just goes to show his Sleet's special perspective on things. And on the right is Ali in his fight with Joe Frazier in 1971. On the left is a picture of Art Dorrington, who was the first Black hockey player to sign a contract with NHL. And on the right is Arthur Ashe in 1979, who was the first Black tennis player selected to play with the U.S. Davis Cup team and the only Black man ever to win the singles titles at Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, and the Australian Open. These are pictures of Hank Aaron throughout the years. Up until 1974, that's him just hanging out playing tennis. And then I'm transitioning now to scanned images of some of the color film slides that I identified and processed. Keeping on with Hank Aaron, these are pictures of him in 1973, one with who I believe is his daughter sitting behind him. On the left here is a picture of Reverend Ralph Abernathy in 1969 with his family singing at a piano. And on the right is a 1990 picture of Paula Abdul from a shoot that they did for her feature on Ebony Jet Showcase, the TV series. And you can see that when we have film slides that are not already identified as being by Sleet, a lot of them have stamps like the ones you can see here identifying who the photographer is. These are some undated pictures from a photo shoot with Shirley Chisholm. On the left here is Eunice Walker Johnson with models at the Ebony Fashion Fair show in 1991. And on the right is a picture from the same year of Linda Johnson Rice, John H. Johnson, and Eunice Walker Johnson presenting Stevie Wonder with a Career Achievement Award at the American Black Achievement Awards. This is a picture not by Sleet, but by Fred Watkins, who is another JPC photographer. I love this picture. I have the left and right switched up. It's actually Moneta Sleet on the right, and his friend and colleague and also renowned photographer Gordon Parks is on the left, and that's in 1991. In addition to the Pulitzer, Sleet was given a Citation for Excellence Award from the Overseas Press Club of America and awards from the National Urban League in 1969 and the National Association of Black Journalists in 1978. Sleet's images have been featured in exhibits at the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the City Art Museum of St. Louis, the Detroit Public Library, and more. After his last assignment at the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, Sleet passed away on September 30th at 70 years of age in New York City. He spent his final days with his wife and family at their home in Baldwin, Long Island. In 2023, the festival Through Sleet's Eyes was hosted in Sleet's hometown, Owensboro, to celebrate his life and legacy, where the documentary A Fine Remembrance, The Story of Moneta Sleet Jr. was screened. That's the same documentary I mentioned earlier. Sleet continues to be remembered as an iconic photographer who documented the humanity of Black experiences in politics and culture throughout the world. Before I get back to talking more about Sleet's work, I'm going to get into a little bit of the pretty chaotic processing that was going through his color film slides. For context, well, these are pictures of the slides and of me with the slides when I was going through them. For context, these film slides were found in John H. Johnson's office in different boxes, I believe, and when things were kind of being rescued for the purchase, they were put in these record storage boxes that you can kind of see in the corner. And so I had to take them out one at a time, one box at a time, one carton at a time to identify any people, places, or subjects or like events and things like that that the photo shoots were of so that I could come up with folder titles. I would put those in a text document and a spreadsheet to also coordinate the tracking of them with the dates, the creation dates, not the dates that are printed on the color film slides, but the dates that are actually written on the curtains because the ones printed don't always indicate the correct creation date. I also kept track of publications when I could find them, seeing where the images were actually published. And sometimes the articles in the magazines provided contextual information that I would also jot down if it was relevant or needed. The cartons also had codes written on them. And I'm going to show you. You can see not all of them had codes written on them, but some of them did have on the bottom right. It's a little hard to read, but that says R-40, Rashad, and Crable. Um, and on the top left here is a carton from the same photo shoot, just I know it's from the same photo shoot because it's the same people, it's identifying the same people, and because they had the same year written on them. Um, but then there were also these pieces of cardboard that, like pieces of boxes, I'm assuming, that were ripped apart that had the keys for the codes and identifying information about what was in each carton with those codes written in pen. So I also used those when I could to figure out what was going on in each carton. These are some pictures I took of a fashion calendar from 1985 that Eunice Walker Johnson sent to Sleet and his colleague, another JPC photographer, G. Marshall Wilson, where she highlighted some fur collection fashion shows that she wanted them to photograph, probably to prepare for the Ebony Fashion Fair show that was coming up. These are some itineraries. On the left is one for a trip to Europe that Sleet took with his wife Juanita and his colleague Lerone Bennett Jr. and Lerone's wife Gloria. On the right is an itinerary for a trip that Sleet took for Ebony to the Caribbean in April 1967. Um, that trip, you can tell from the travel dates if you look kind of in the middle there, just how busy he was. And also, I could tell because from that one trip alone, I found over 100 cartons, and there's probably more in other parts of the archive. So it's a very busy trip, and it seemed like he was taking pictures of everything. These are some pictures kind of looking at the film slides through a light box. This is how I would look at pictures if they were too dark or if I needed to get a better view of them. These are actually 120 millimeter slides, which are bigger than the ones I was working with. But I thought it'd be a good example to show like what things look like when you're actually looking through the film slides while working with them. These are pictures of all of the film slides after my colleague Skyla Hearn and I sorted them, and it might be hard to believe, but they are in alphabetical order. This room is actually the processing workroom that our team, who we hired just before we did what's in these pictures. So we took advantage of them not being on site quite yet and we're able to use all of that space to spread out and sort all 6,000, over 6,000 cartons, um, so that I could later rebox them in order and catalog them from there and actually rehouse them into um, the boxes that you actually see here. So this is the after shot. It went from all of these to these 80 boxes of slide boxes for 35 millimeter film slides. Uh, the process overall, I try to think if there was a good way to kind of explain what it felt like or what it was like to go through it. But it's hard to explain because it felt not not like entirely chaotic, but it felt like I was kind of managing a lot of my own thoughts of keeping track of things in my head with the documents that I had online with what was actually in the boxes. And sometimes things didn't match up, and I had to kind of figure out a way to make it work and make sure that everything was accounted for. But overall, it was a big learning experience and also really interesting to get to see like what it was like for a photographer to document so many events throughout history and have his life's work finally be organized. To start closing out my presentation, I want to read this quote from Johnny Mansour, who's a professor and historian based in Haifa, from the book called Against Erasure, A Photographic Memory of Palestine Before the Nakba. The quote reads, "The photographic image, in harmonizing time and space, behaves semiotically, revealing a certain unrepeatable reality of people and characteristics that are in the image, the symbols of that image understood, or perhaps not, by the viewer. It carries with it and expresses messages both explicit and implicit, seen in their own way, inviting us to go back, to remember. And for those of us aware of what happens in the photo, it is a reinforcement of knowledge and memory. While the form is inherently static, it allows us to interact with the time-space axis by virtue of collective and individual memory." Personally, I felt a strong pull to go back and to remember while looking through thousands of Sleet's color slides, literally holding them up to a light source to look through the film, and also looking through the time-space axis as described by Mansour. As a deeply spiritual person, I've had my fair share of spiritual experiences while working with Sleet's photographs. I've teared up, cried a bit, laughed, wondered, followed clues, and sat with the beauty of so many moments captured by Sleet and his camera. I feel a certain closeness to Sleet that I'm not really sure I can describe, at least not yet. I can say that I feel honored to have had the opportunity to work so intimately with thousands of images created by an amazing photographer who is trusted by so many people because of how he showed care for them in their relationships, not just through his photographic work. Finally, I want to read a little bit from the afterword in the book Special Moments that I mentioned earlier. This was written by Lerone Bennett Jr., who was a JPC editor. "Can I get a witness? That's the question, especially for people who stand at a point in history with their backs against the wall. For people on both sides of that wall, for high and low, black and white, the central question is, can I get somebody to confirm my reality? Can I get somebody to say I was there? Can I get somebody to tell my story and say amen and hallelujah? Can I get a witness? Moneta Sleet Jr., my brother and teacher and friend, answered that question with his eye and his soul and his life. He came up from Owensboro, Kentucky, up from segregation, up from Jim Crow schools and buses and cameras. And in the end, by some miracle no one can explain, he not only endured but prevailed, becoming one of the greatest photographers in the Republic and leaving a collection of indelible images that will never die. Sleet, everybody called him Sleet, was there. He had a camera and he saw it all. I read this because I think a lot of us have been feeling a sense of unreality these days, of feeling like the things happening around or to us and around the world couldn't possibly be real, but they are, in positive, negative, in between, and all the ways. Sleet took on the daunting call of being a witness, of confirming his people's realities, of saying, I was there, and so were you, of telling his people stories, of being there and making sure that those who weren't still got to be a witness too. And through his photos, he continues to take us there with him. We owe it to Sleet's legacy to continue to be witnesses by taking actions with the skills we have. Sleet documented Black families, everyday life, stars, and movements for liberation by doing what he did best, taking photos. He shared those special moments, as he called them, for the world to see. I encourage you all to think about how you can drive forward the movements that you're part of by using the skills you have. We witness so much every day, and it's up to us to decide what to do with our testimonies. Sleet's legacy is proof of how impactful storytelling and relationship building can be in challenging oppression. I hope sharing some of Sleet's work, truly just a tiny fraction of his photographs from his incredibly impactful career, has moved you in the same ways it's moved me and so many others to join political and cultural movements led by our own people. I hope you share your special moments in whatever ways you can. And some extra info before I finally close out and start taking questions. On the left here is a link and a QR code where you can access the resource guide that I think Kelsey also linked earlier. That resource guide has a lot more information about the archive and links to related collections, programs and events, articles, and a lot more. And if you have any questions about image licensing requests or anything else, you can email jpclicensing@getty.edu. And finally, I'm excited to say that you can keep an eye out for the launch of the JPCA website, where you'll be able to see the digitized images of the series that have been processed and scanned so far. They're being processed in batches, so it's not everything, but it'll be a peek into what's coming. And that's coming summer 2025. So please keep an eye out for that. And I'll stop sharing my screen, drink a bit of water, and then I guess we can do questions.
Thank you so much. There's so much love coming in for you in the chat right now. So take a breath, take a sip, and say so many people saying bravo, wonderful presentation, clapping hands, phenomenal job, thank you, amazing, amazing job, excellent work. Just yeah, tons of love. So hopefully you feel it coming through the computer to you. And also there looks like there's some networking happening in the Zoom chat too with somebody Somebody, let's see here, is someone named Sarah Hemingway is from Owensboro, Sleet's hometown, and they're doing some sort of documentary up there about Sleet's career. So check the chat if you have any personal connections and you want to reach out to Sarah. So that's a very cool outcome of what we have going on in this Zoom right now. So for everyone out there in the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat of Zoom. We also have a Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can put your question there if you want. Everybody on YouTube, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat on YouTube. My colleague Lori will be telling us what those questions are as well. So while you guys think about questions that you might have, I have a couple questions. So I was just wondering, photographs propose pose unique challenges for archivists as, a format that's different than paper or whatever. So can you tell us if while you were going through the boxes and processing things, were there any conservation or preservation issues that you encountered and maybe let us know a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think in general, I'll say the archive as a whole is in pretty good condition considering the time frame that it spans, and also considering that I didn't mention this earlier, but the archive, when it was still a part of JPC in the building on 820 South Michigan, was called the photo files, and so they were in active use, and so they were constantly taking things in and out of the folders and things like that. So I'm pretty sure a lot of the like conservation issues come from that use of just like, actually putting them into layouts and things like that and editing them. As far as the slides go themselves, there were like some slides that I think have been handled so much that the cardboard or the plastic that was holding them and framing them had cracked. But there were very few of them, and some of them we were able to like put in, like make makeshift sleeves for them out of Mylar, Mylar sleeves for like bigger film strips. Um, so it's kind of a figuring out what we can do with what we've got. And then we do have conservators who we work with at the Getty who are able to work on things and restore them if they need to. But overall, the film slides were in great condition. I think they were in good conditions because the cartons that they were in might not have been, but because they were tucked inside. And if you've never seen one of those yellow cartons for the color film slides, the way most of them work is like there's a cover and you push out what's inside, and then what's inside is the actual carton that carries the film slides. So they're pretty well protected. Um, I think there were some that I had to pull out because they had water damage, which I think is probably one of the most common things that happens in archives as a whole. But no, nothing too bad or too concerning.
That's awesome. I have this acronym YACA stands for Yet Another Crisis Averted. So I feel like yet another crisis averted. Your slides and your photographs were in good condition. That's great. Just got more love coming in for the chat for you. Great presentation. Thank you. Someone sharing that they met Sleet at an exhibit of his work in the 1980s, which is cool. Yeah, everyone out there, if you have memories or particular experiences, please feel free to share them in the chat too. So we do have a question from Maya. Will this recording be available for viewing on YouTube? Yes. So right now it's streaming to YouTube. Once we conclude this, it'll be saved on the San Francisco Public Library YouTube page. So you can grab the link from there, share it with everybody you know. Help us get our stats up. We're going to count our stats in 30 days and see how many views. So let's see, maybe you share it far and wide. We can get over 1,000 views maybe. Cool. And then I don't see any Q&A in the Q&A function. Lori, do you have any Q&A from YouTube?
No, we do not have any YouTube questions.
Okay. Well, I have another question because I'm so interested. That's why I wanted to do this program. So you have mentioned that you connected with photographs with articles and you recommended several articles that you thought were really interesting. And I know in my work as a librarian and previous work as an archivist, you could fall down some serious research rabbit holes. And so I was wondering if you could just maybe give a little more expansive stories about any research holes that you fell down while you're working on the photographs.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many. We try to set like time limits for ourselves in the archives for how long to go into a rabbit hole because sometimes it can get really, really deep. Um, I think one of my favorite ones, when I first started, one of the first like cartons that I pulled of the film slides was pictures of who I knew was Sidney Poitier, but and but like it he was being knighted, like being, I don't know what the language is, but he was being made a knight, and I was very confused as to what was going on and why he was there. And then I found the article that the images were published in, that um, Queen Elizabeth had picked him. Like, I guess if you're royalty, you can just pick a list of people that you want to give knighthood, and he was one of those people. Um, and so that was a really interesting like story to just follow, of like finding the date that it was created, going into the magazines, looking up Sidney Poitier, finding the exact article, and then reading that story about how he was just loved by the Queen so much that she wanted to grant him knighthood. Um, and it seemed like it didn't come with any responsibilities, just kind of the title. But yeah, I thought that was nice.
Is that where then Sir goes in front of his name, so he becomes Sir Sidney Poitier?
I think so,
Is that
yeah.
that's the distinction? No. Okay, we do have a question. Are you still currently working in the archive, or what are you currently working on in the archive?
Yeah, what am I currently working on? So I am working on a smaller processing project of pictures related to staff, visitors, offices, and events for JPC. So they're not necessarily business records per se, but they're like photographs of JPC as a company. So there's pictures of a lot of the staff throughout the years in the building and at different events, a lot of pictures of John H. Johnson and the Johnson family. Um, and then pictures of like people who were coming to visit the building or the company or whatever it may be. I actually saw a picture the other day of like helicopters landing on Michigan Avenue in front of the building, which, if you've never been to Chicago, Michigan Avenue is arguably the busiest street in the city. It's like the Magnificent Mile downtown. And so I was confused as to why a helicopter was landing in the middle of this super busy street in front of the JPC building. I haven't figured that one out. I didn't look that one up, but that's been what I've been working on, and that was interesting.
Like a million research questions can emerge from doing any sort of archival work. Yeah. Let's see, we have a question. I know the photos are from all over the world, but did anything make you explore Chicago in a different way?
Yeah, actually, speaking of the JPC building, I'm from Chicago, so I grew up here, and I moved back after going back and forth for college on the East Coast. And I don't really spend that much time downtown where the JPC building still is. I believe it's been given historic landmark status. And so when I started working at the JPC archive, we would hear a lot about, 820 South Michigan, 820 South Michigan. And then there was one day that I was driving down Lakeshore Drive, which passes, you can kind of see at a distance what's on Michigan Avenue, the taller buildings that are there. And I was just driving and happened to look over to my right because I was checking before I turned. And the JP, I could see the big sign that says like Ebony and Jet on the top of the building. And by then I had already been working at JPC for like 6, 7 or something months. But I was like, wow, I think it made me realize that growing up in Chicago, there's so many places I still haven't been, so many things I still haven't seen. It's a huge city. If you've been here, you know. Um, and I think it just makes me appreciate that a little bit more, that like there's always more to explore and learn about in the city. Yeah.
Did you have like a chill run down your back being like, I am connected to this iconic like
Yeah.
organization?
Yeah, no, and there's like I think my coworkers know this. I get chills all the time at the archive. There's always something that I'm like, whoa, this is a connection that I wasn't expecting to make. Even when I was putting together some of the biographical information for the note that's going into the finding aid for the Sleet photographs. Sleet's birthday is 2 days after mine in the calendar year. So it's things like that that I'm like, whoa.
That's crazy because my birthday is February 13th. So you're the
Oh, it's
12th,
the
I'm the
12th,
13th,
13th.
and it Sleet's the 14th. Wow. Yeah. I mean, does it
It's
mean
so
anything?
funny.
Who knows? But to us, it's significant.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Uh,
Mr. Johnson's birthday is January 19th. Wow.
So coming up, yeah, we just had MLK's birthday was the 15th, right? And then Mr. Johnson's birthday will be in a couple days. So we're in a hot zone. Oh, so we have only a couple more minutes. Lori, I want to check in any YouTube questions that we should get to.
No, no YouTube questions at this time.
Okay. And then, well, let's see. Let's just use the last couple minutes. Do you want to tell us where we can find your zines? Do you have a place where you sell them or do exchanges or anything?
So I used to sell zines and make them and sell them independently, but right now I've kind of stopped doing that. I'm focusing more on making zines with groups, especially related to like political organizing. So the zines that I'm currently working on most frequently is called Beet Street Zine, Beet, like the vegetable. And you can find us on Instagram. If you're in Chicago, if you happen to be in Chicago, we're starting to distribute those zines throughout different food hubs and free food fridges. And if not, there's a link in our Instagram to find the digital copy of our second and most recent issue. The most recent issue actually is related to Ebony. We hosted some dinners and art making events for queer and trans Black people and people of color in Chicago to focus on reflecting on the legacy of Frida DeKnight, who wrote a JPC published cookbook, which was one of the first African American cookbooks published out there, and also wrote the food columns for Ebony magazine. I think if I'm remembering correctly, some of my zines that I used to sell myself are now at Brown Recluse Zine Distro, based, I believe, near you guys, if I'm, yeah. So some of them are there. I don't know if they're out of stock. That might be it for my zines, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we've had Brown Recluse do some zine workshops. We have this big thing, the Night of Ideas, where the library's open until 2 a.m. and people with DJ and stuff. So yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thumbs up, much love from the chat. We're basically at time. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Keep up the great work. It's just so valuable for future historians and just people. So have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.